the video production team from North Beach Media, and all of our co-sponsors. We also have co-sponsorships from the Broward Republican Executive Committee, as well as Southeastern University Chapter, Movement for a People's Party, Bring It Home Florida. As you can tell, with that list of co-sponsors, this is not a partisan event, and voting should not be a partisan event. It should really be talking about the integrity of our election. It should go beyond party. This is something that should concern all of us as American citizens. Now, many of you know that I ran in this district for Congress, and we confronted all kinds of strange occurrences when we were running. The results, a lot of anomalies in the results, and there'll be some discussion of our race, but this goes beyond Florida's 23rd congressional district. So, give me one moment. We're going to start off with Joseph Van de Bogart, and he's the president of the Van de Bogart Law Firm, chair of the Election Integrity Committee of the Broward Republican Executive Committee. He's also the Florida chair of the Republican National Lawyers Association. He played a prominent role in the 2018 recount at the Broward Supervisor of Elections for the votes for U.S. Senate and Florida's governor's race. So we're very pleased to have Joseph here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Joseph Van de Bogart, and I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to speak this evening on such a prominent panel. In 2018, during the senatorial election, I got a first-hand experience of the inconvenience and stress caused by our populace when dealing with how our system come apart at the Supervisor of Elections office here in Broward County through the misorganization that occurred. We all saw the news. We were kind of once again the laughing stock of the country due to problems with the recount and problems at the Broward Supervisor of Elections offices. And as I actively participated in that process, I took an interest in how to fix that situation and fix the problems that came about during 2018. I'm a native resident of South Florida, and I've spent almost my entire life here in Broward County, so I care deeply about our county and how our county looks nationally, and that our votes are going to count here in Broward. So why are we here? We're here because in 2018, we discovered that our system wasn't working, at least here in Broward, and our supervisor of election here in Broward wasn't functioning correctly. One of the biggest problems we had here in Broward in 2018 was an issue with absentee ballots. I don't know if you personally found that your absentee ballot didn't come timely, or wasn't properly counted, or your signature wasn't matched, or wasn't counted in time, but there was a huge issue with absentee ballots in 2018, and the Supervisor of Elections office didn't properly plan for dealing with those absentee ballots. One of the major reasons why they got so backed up in finalizing the counting of the actual election day, they were partially, if not completely, shut down the day before the election, so absentee ballots weren't counted the day before the election. And thus, when people were looking at the news and seeing that the total amount of ballots cast were going up and up and up, it was freaking citizens out. It was scaring people because they thought ballots were suddenly being created out of thin air. We think this may have been a matter of the absentee ballots coming in late or not being counted. And the way the Supervisor of Election was reporting how the absentee ballots were being counted, whether they were ballots cast or ballots counted. Thus, due to those failures after the 2018 election, the Florida legislature has taken significant steps on trying to tighten up that absentee ballot system. And I've gone through all of the changes that the legislature made during the 2019 session, many of which were made to address either the litigation that occurred in 2018 or the other problems that happened in 2018. And I'm just going to go through a few of those, primarily the absentee ballot issue and a new Florida statute 104.051, well, rather it's a section in that statute, which would basically bar a supervisor of election or elected official who has intentionally violated the election statute from receiving pay for 24 months if they do violate that statute intentionally. And so a lawsuit such as Tim's or a lawsuit like RPOF's that resulted in a judgment against the supervisor of elections could then more or less retire them because they're not going to get paid for 2 years. And that's going to be beneficial in the future to scare scare electors, these supervisor elections, to follow the law to the T and to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So a few more of these changes dealing with absentee ballots we have is there's now a formal signature matching training process that has to be taught to supervisor of elections. A big issue in 2018 was how do you tell whether or not a signature matches, and if a signature doesn't match, how does a citizen correct that signature mismatch? Again, this is all mailing in ballots from home. There has to be some way to verify the person that's mailing that ballot is the person that's mailing. We now have numerous ways in which you can correct that. The supervisor of elections has to text message you, email you, potentially even call you. It's an entire list of things that have to be written on your absentee ballot. We change the absentee ballot itself with better instructions on what has to be filled out. The legislature did, in my opinion, a very good job at thoroughly vetting out and cleaning up the absentee ballot system, which hopefully will help us in 2020 and give citizens more confidence in voting by mail. And again, the issue with the willful violation in the 24 months of no salary should affect our supervisors of elections and make sure that they comply with the statute as written. Moreover, the mail-in ballots are now required to be served and received earlier in order to quicken the determination of whether or not there's a mismatch of the signatures and whether or not those signatures should then be cured by a citizen to come in and change the signature that they had previously registered. These are just a few of the changes that happened. And again, I have this whole binder of changes that happened in 2019. They went through the entire statute and fixed a lot of the problems that occurred, which I'm hopefully now we're going to be able to look at this and fix even more problems before the 2020 election here in the 2020 session, which will then hopefully come into effect in July and then be effective next November to make sure that all of our votes count and that there isn't a problem like there was in 2018. With that being said, the senatorial election in 2018 made clear that our system needed a lot of help. We don't want to be on the news. Broward County should be a place where people want to come and visit and move and enjoy their lives, not a place where people question whether their votes are being properly counted and being the laughing stock of the country. I believe the state legislature has made some good inroads in fixing those problems that occurred in 2018, and hopefully we're going to have even more of those fixes. So with that being said, I thank you for your time and thank you for having me.
I should also mention one of the co-sponsors is the Movement for a People's Party, MPP. There were lots of MPP folks that were very active in my campaign and many other campaigns here in South Florida. I'd like to invite up Nick Brana, who's the National Director of Movement for a People's Party, to speak for a few minutes. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you to all the panelists. It's heartening to see the bipartisan, multi-partisan panel on this issue, which should be universal. So I think that's a big achievement. And so I just want to open by congratulating Tim mostly, and everyone else here for putting that together. When Tim asked if I could speak, I thought, what is it that I can most add to this conversation? We're going to hear some we already have some very technical perspectives that go deep into the weeds about what is wrong and faulty about our electoral system. And so there's a lot wrong. Clearly, that is why confidence in our electoral system is so low. Recent elections and elections before that have proven that our voting system is simply broken. It needs a complete overhaul. That is in terms of the security of machines, but also in so many other respects. Americans have rightfully lost confidence in our electoral system. It's rife with black box voting, voter suppression schemes, billions in money in politics, which amounts to elections being auctions as opposed to actual, one person, one vote. So with the list of things that we have to do is enormous. We have to switch, while most countries enjoy, the US is exceptional in all the wrong ways when it comes to this, when it comes to our system. While most countries enjoy multi-party systems, especially wealthy countries, OECD countries, the United States only has a two-party system. While most countries enjoy even and fair standards for parties to get on the ballot, the United States is one of the only countries in the world that sets ballot access standards actually a lot higher for independent parties. So we have to restore that integrity and trust in our democracy with hand-counted paper ballots. And I think that's one of the key messages that the movement should unite around and that should come out of this process. And so to speak about what I think that I could lend and the Movement for People's Party could lend to this conversation is our organizing. And that is, in particular, the movement needs to do certain things. Because this is such a technical and obfuscated subject matter, it can be hard to communicate and to really get across in clear terms. People can tune out very quickly when you start talking about the technicalities. The system is built with a level of outrageous complexity that is meant to turn people away, that is meant to disguise what is happening. And so what we as a movement, I believe, an election security movement need to do is we need to distill very simple messages and show how it connects to the very issues that we all care about, whether it's healthcare, the issues that affect us every day. We need to draw those connections directly about how the lack of election security, about how compromised machines are preventing us from achieving all of these other things that we care about. We need to, I think, get dynamic spokespeople, and particularly young spokespeople who can talk and make that connection, and who can show how the lack of election security in our country is directly affecting them by their inability to achieve the policies that they deserve or even get fair representation on those policies. This is a very abstract subject. And I also believe that we should build a multi-issue coalition, approach unions, approach NGOs, and should speak to them about these issues and about how draw the connections for them, about how their issues are being blocked specifically by this. And hopefully as well, myself and some other MPP organizers got together with Lulu over the summer, and we had a conversation about the benefits of creating a kind of model bill or initiative that allows volunteers to connect. Because from an organizing perspective, what you want is volunteers and people to be able to plug into your initiative quickly and for it to be very simple for them to know what to do. And so there needs to be kind of a clear, uniform initiative, a way for people to participate across different areas. And so those are some of the contributions that I wanted to make, that MPP wants to make. And we're proud to be here to stand with all of you to go forward and make that so that this movement can succeed, because it needs to, and there's no other choice.
I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. This is not this material is kind of somewhat difficult to wrap our minds around, and it's such an important issue. Everyone's got other places they could be. I've been saying this is the hearing that Congress should be holding. And our next speaker is a lawyer who heads Kathy Jackson Lehrman, who is a principal of the Lehrman Law Firm. And she's a whistleblower lawyer. We've heard a lot about whistleblowers in Washington these days. Kathy Lehrman represents whistleblowers, and she's been conducting a whistleblower investigation of the Broward Supervisor Elections Office. She's one of the most fearless and courageous lawyers I know, and we're very pleased to have her here tonight.
evening. First of all, I want to tell you, it's an honor to be among the speakers tonight. It's an honor because you have some of the greatest experts in America who understand electoral fraud and understand exactly what's going on in Broward County. What I'm going to tell you is what I can tell you. I have been and always do work with law enforcement, both state and federal, on any type of investigation. So what I give you tonight is the pieces that I can give you. But I came here to tell you something you probably already know. We need to take back control of Broward County. We need to take it back from the corrupt politicians, the lawyers, the lobbyists, and their cohorts who have stolen our constitutional rights as voters, rigged our elections, and defrauded our residents. I am very passionate about this issue. Probably 2 years ago, I wasn't as passionate because I didn't know as much. But the other thing that happened was the Parkland massacre and the voting after that. And I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about how I saw a community I believe had come together, supposedly splintered completely in an election, which I don't believe is true. The people of Parkland don't believe it's true, and the families of the victims don't believe it's true. But I digress. What I should be talking to you about tonight, and Tim would enjoy me having this discussion with you, would be about the electoral fraud and vote rigging that resulted in the conviction of Brenda Snipes. That's what I should be talking to you about. Because the prior Broward County Supervisor of Elections, pursuant to a court order, was determined to have violated both public records laws, voting laws, as well as election laws at the state and federal level, which were felonies. The ruling against Snipes came out of a case that Tim Canova filed in a lawsuit from the 2016 election. I'm sure all of you know about it, raising multiple irregularities in the voting process, blatant violations of law, and corruption. Tim had challenged Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Schultz ended up the winner in a very controversial race. However, I am a lawyer and have been one for more than 3 decades in this state. I know when the fix is in. And as far as I'm concerned, the fact that Snipes was never brought to justice is unconscionable. And it's unconscionable on every level, whether it's law enforcement, the judicial system, or whoever else. Snipes was allowed to walk away with a resignation and a $130,000 pension after she's fixed every election she's been involved in since she started. That is disgusting. But I didn't get into this until the Parkland massacre, and then my attempt by my law firm to help pro bono the Parkland victims, who the families really wanted to bring in new blood in the Broward County School Board, people who care about our children and not their paycheck or their spouse's paycheck that comes from the Broward County School Board. That's when I got involved. So when I saw the election results in August of 2018, I didn't believe them. And I decided to myself, and it was a gut feeling, but I trust my gut, you need to pursue this. Part of my practice is public corruption, others is securities violations. I deal with Ponzi schemers all the time. Trust me when I tell you, I'll take a Ponzi schemer any day over a corrupt politician. They have much less impact on your world. A few days after the election, we issued a press release announcing a corruption investigation of the Supervisor of Elections Office for Broward County for both corruption and fraud. In my press release, I asked members of the public to please come forward and provide me with information about irregularities in the voting process and corruption in what I'm going to call the SOE, so I'm not saying Supervisor of Election Territory. And come forward, they did. People from all over this country, mostly either residents of Florida or prior residents of Florida or absentee voters from Florida, contacted me with a multitude of issues. Many were willing to help me, but what struck me was they were afraid. They were, and why? Why would you be afraid to come forward about a voting issue? Well, I know why. We'll get to that. They came forward, and as I talked to them, many of them I referred out to various agencies, the Florida Election Commission, the FBI, the governor's office, and some other regulatory agencies, which I won't mention now. What they brought up to me was multiple types of voter fraud. But what struck me was that I got several calls from people who were software and data management experts from around the country, particularly California. These people told me that they believed the software that was being used by SOE was manipulated and the algorithms were changed to make sure that the result was as SOE desired. And they were clear on that because they had run an analysis of several of the races and found that the results were statistically impossible. Now, I am just a lawyer. I don't know what statistically impossible means. I just know that that means it's highly unlikely that the results we received were actually true. And I believe it more now after talking to over 200 voters or people who tried to vote, who told me several things about the problems that they had with voting. There were voters who were out of state who requested absentee ballots 3, 4, 5 times and never received the ballot. I had people who told me, they called Snipes' office and said, I will pay for the FedEx. If you will FedEx the voter card to me, I will pay for it. They still never received it. Voters who completed absentee ballots found after the fact that the SOE website said they never voted, even though they knew they had mailed in their voter registration. Other voters had requested an absentee ballot, but decided at the last minute, because they happened to be in town and they thought they were going to be gone, that they would go to the polls and they would vote. Well, guess what? They had already voted. I talked to at least 8 separate husband and wives who were under that scenario. How is that possible in a system that is being properly monitored, guarded, and checked? It's not. Then I had voters who had requested an absentee ballot, but ended up not voting, didn't send it in, had a relative get sick. Guess what? They went on the SOE website and they had voted, which was kind of amazing. Then I had situations where voters reported that the names of some of the candidates were missing on their ballot. When they questioned it with the poll workers, they told them they had no idea why that was and to just complete their ballot and move on. That is unacceptable. And some of those people are Parkland family representatives, which makes it even more frustrating and irritating for me to deal with. Other voters were told, and no offense to whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or you're some voters received Democratic ballots, even though they were registered Republicans, because they were told that their registration had expired, and under the SOC rules, they defaulted to the Democratic ballot. Now, I don't know if that's actually a true rule or not, but that sounds pretty unfair to me. I mean, I'm just saying, okay? Then, some voting facilities on the last day of voting, which is always usually the largest day, were inaccessible, particularly in areas where there's a large elderly population who live around it and would need to walk to it. And so you make it inaccessible, and none of those people vote, which is exactly what happened in Sunrise. That one I will name. Now, in addition, there were power outages at multiple facilities during the voting process, and voters were told to just complete your ballot and turn it in. When they questioned, well, how do I know, like, my whole vote counted? They were told, don't worry about it, we'll make sure it's correctly counted. And that's all they heard. In addition, there were some ugly allegations of votes for sale at some of the polling places in Broward, particularly on the east side of the county. That's as far as I can go with that. Here's where I get really ticked off, because I do a lot of elderly financial exploitation work, because Ponzi schemers tend to prey upon elderly people. Elderly people in droves reported that they felt intimidated and threatened by poll workers if they asked questions about the process or needed help. Republican voters stood in line for hours at one polling place, and I'm talking 2 or 3, because they were told that their machine was broken, while the Democrats, using the other machine, were walking right through, voting, and leaving. Democratic voters' cheat sheets were illegally passed out at the polls of one facility in Sunrise, right by the door to the polling facility, which is totally illegal, with a guard standing right there watching it and poll workers standing behind the door. As you can imagine, after hearing all this, I was convinced I was right that the August 2018 election was just a repeat of the 2016 election, where Snipes had been in control, and that in fact every election in which Snipes had been in control had been rigged. And I believe that today. But I don't believe Snipes acted alone. Please don't think that we make her the bad guy and everybody else walks away. No one pulls off a scam like this by themselves, particularly when it comes to multiple methodologies, including the manipulation of software used by SOE to count the votes. There is no way Brenda Snipes could pull that off herself. She had a lot of help. She had lawyers, lobbyists, friends, politicians, and others in her command who did what she wanted done. So it is with a great deal of pleasure and also a lot of angst that I call on the Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General of the United States in Washington, D.C., to initiate an investigation into the 2016 and the 2018 elections in Broward County to find out if, in fact, the elections were rigged. Our community deserves to know the truth. If you go to Washington to get it, then, that's the way it is. But let me say one other thing that's going to make me more uncomfortable with the legal community in Broward County than I am now. I don't understand why Mike Sachs, who is the Broward County State Attorney, has never done anything to address the judgment that Nova got against Brenda Snipes. And I don't understand why no other prosecutor in Broward County has done anything to address the judgment that Nova got against Snipes, finding her guilty of multiple felonies. And just like the vote rigging, I don't believe she acted alone. And I think people are being protected, and it is totally unacceptable. I wonder, is she one of the many untouchable politicians in Broward County? As you know, and as everybody every day now talks about the Parkland shooting, justice demands accountability. As residents of Broward County, we are painfully aware of what happens when there isn't accountability, integrity, and truthfulness. We have paid a high price for corruption and self-serving conduct in this county. We cannot stand by and permit electoral fraud and corruption to continue unchecked. But we have to stand together in this county, in this state, and in this nation as a group of people to stop electoral fraud. As great as it is that all of you are here, this is not enough firepower to get these people. And this is going on everywhere. And I believe that in all of these states, there is collusion among the people who are doing the vote rigging. There is no doubt in my mind. After talking to people all over the country, telling me the same story I'm hearing from the voters in Broward. So we need to understand that permitting this just ignores the will of the people. The vote of the people is never recognized here because it's being manipulated by corrupt politicians. For once, I listened to him, and I'm only doing 10 minutes. Thank him later. I'm going to leave you with one last thought. When I announced my corruption investigation, I was somewhat stunned by the number of lawyers who told me I was crazy, I was committing career suicide, and I was wasting my time. Their opinion was that the Broward SOE was corrupt. They admitted that. But I was never going to prove it, and the SOE and other politicians would retaliate against me. I thought about that for a minute and concluded that if I didn't do anything, then I was complacent in what I felt was a public corruption at many levels, including the prosecutorial level. As a lawyer, I took an oath to uphold the law and the Constitution of the United States, and until the day I die, I intend to do that. And I want my brothers and sisters in the bar to get off their butts and help me and all of us throughout the United States who are fighting to right this wrong do what they took an oath to do. But it didn't take me long to get over the, they're going to ruin your career, they're going to ruin your life, yeah, whatever, okay. Because I went back to a mantra that I've had for a long time. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And that's where we are right now. So you are either standing with us or you are useless. And I don't believe the people of Broward County are useless. I know they care about who our elected officials are. They care about our children. They care about our security and our safety and our community. And I don't believe that all my fellow members of Florida Bar are as cranky as the ones who, warned me. I believe that we must make the decision to go after truth and justice in the deception which is Broward County and fight it with everything we have. Thank you for listening to me. May God bless you all and the great city of Florida.
so much now. And I could relate to a lot of what she said, obviously, that many of us could. We've been waiting for the Broward bench and bar to step up and to speak out and to call for justice. In our case against Brenda Snipes, we sworn videotape depositions of Brenda Snipes admitting to destroying ballots. That's handing prosecutors a case on a silver platter with a nice bow tied on it, and we're still waiting for prosecutors to wake up from their slumber. Now, I am very pleased to introduce our next speaker. Ian Sancho came to the supervisor of elections office. He's a Leon County supervisor, and he came with a different kind of a background from many other supervisors. And he, I should say, believes that cyber attacks are not our biggest problem. According to Sancho, Florida does not properly audit its vote counting machines, but instead simply assumes the machines are accurate when counting or recounting votes. He said, if the software is tampered with, what do you think is going to happen if you rescan the ballots? You'll get the same answers. The presumption that the voting machine is already correct is a silly presumption to begin with. It guarantees you won't find the problem if there is one. So Ian Sancho comes here with a wealth of experience in actually supervising elections in Florida. He understands exactly what the problems are and what the solutions are. I'm very pleased and very thankful that Ian Sancho is here. Very pleased to introduce
him. Good evening. In 1986, I was a third-year law student at FSU, focused on environmental issues primarily. In 1985, Florida legislature had passed Landmark Growth Management Act, and I wanted to go into Leon County Commission and implement the first Growth Management Act of planning in the state of Florida had ever implemented. And so I ran for that a single member district. And on August 4th, the largest electoral disaster in the history of the state of Florida occurred until the 2000 election. And 5,000 citizens who went to vote in the August 4th primary were turned away from the polls without being able to cast their votes because it turned out the supervisor of elections had negligently programmed the lever voting machines that we used in Leon County. And thus the voting machines could not record any votes at all. I went to court, suing to have the election set aside. I mean, how could the election be valid if 5,000 people were turned away from the polls in a jurisdiction that only had about 80,000 voters? After a 3-day trial, Judge Hall told me, Mr. Sancho, there's no precedent in the state of Florida for overturning an election. You can't show me any precedent. And in truth, I couldn't, because there had never been an election destroyed at that level before in the history of Florida. But Judge Hall looked at me and he said, Mr. Sancho, you have no legal remedy. Your only remedy is political. And I understood exactly what Judge Hall was telling me, and I ran for and I captured the supervisor of elections 2 years later in a landslide. And that was just the beginning of Mr. Hare's wild ride. Because right off the bat, I found that assumptions that everybody had were incorrect. Like most people, I always assumed that when I voted, it was counted. That was my assumption. And on August 4th of 1986, I recognized that was false. And what I ended up doing was spending the next 28 years of my life trying to fix the problems that I saw in the process of elections, particularly in Florida, but I've since kind of branched out, particularly after I've retired. I retired in 2016 after 28 years in the Leon County Supervisor of Elections Office. And I, like many of you, had many problems dealing with Broward County elections for a long time. We have a lot of students at Florida State University, at FAMU, And up until we went to a statewide database in 2006, all voting was done on a countywide basis. And I had thousands of students in the 2004 presidential election come into my office and tell me, we've asked for absentee ballots. They've never arrived. Can we vote here? And the answer is no. Under the Florida laws in 2004, you could only vote in the county that you were registered. Now that's since changed. That's an excellent change. That change occurred in 2006. We went to a statewide voter registration database so that in fact, when you moved from one county to another county, you didn't need to re-register anymore. That was an address change. And you could do an address change up to and including on election day. So after 2004, after 2006, all of those students that were from Broward County, in Leon County, when they came to vote, we switched them over to Leon County, registered them there so they could vote in every election and didn't have to wait on mail ballots that would never get to them. That was the only way and we tried to call the supervisor elections office in Broward County. On election day, as the supervisor of elections, my staff and I could not get through to talk to anybody. So I can imagine the problems that citizens actually here had. You couldn't get through to your elections office either. That's simply not acceptable. So while I'm sorry to make little of anyone's problems, I'm glad that Brenda Snipes is no longer supervisor of elections in the state of Florida. But she is not the only kind of problem that exists. Our entire laws are based upon assumptions that are wrong. Assumptions using electronic voting systems in Florida that say the voting machine numbers are always correct. That's the assumption at the Division of Elections. That's the assumption of the supervisor of elections. The voting machine numbers were always correct. That is not a very good assumption, and I wanted to test that. So in 2005, I brought in some computer scientists from around, one from Europe and one from Massachusetts. And we did the first unaffiliated, i.e. I never contacted the vendor, and we attacked our own system with something called a red team attack, which is a common thing. Hewlett-Packard run red team attacks on their computers. Major corporations, if they're intelligent, will do red team attacks on their technology, see if there are vulnerabilities. When we did that red team attack, we found that it was possible to steal an election and have the individual who is the administrator not even be aware that the election could be stolen. And this caused a major, major problem. I will tell you right off the bat, the state of Florida, instead of telling me, thank you, they came after me to take me out of office. Governor Jeb Bush and Secretary of State Glinda Hood started the procedure to have me removed from office. And I fought that. I actually went and got a lawyer, Lita Rodriguez from Miami-Dade, who ran the Miami-Dade election coalition. And she defended me. And we, in fact, found that there was a whole group of people stemming from the White House and Harriet Meyer's office down to Congressmen in Miami that were all trying to have me removed from office because I disclosed the fact that voting equipment could be manipulated to steal the election, and the election administrator would not even have a clue. And the reason that was possible is because the state of Florida does not audit the paper ballots that we vote on, ladies and gentlemen. We don't audit those. And there is a provision in the law that's called an audit provision. And it is done after the certification of Florida's elections, which is pretty dumb. Because if in fact the audit shows that the voting machines were wrong, it is not possible to change the outcome of the election. And I know elections around this state that the wrong issue won on the ballot because county machines counted them wrong. And in fact, Broward is one of the famous ones going back to an early age, back in 2002, when the absentee ballot counters, these 650 automatic counters that they use here, or they used to use in Broward County, once it got up to 37,000, it started subtracting votes with each additional mail ballot that was fed through the system, because a human being had flipped a wrong switch. And so you could count all the way votes up to 37,000, and then it started subtracting votes out of that. So it's not only fraud that you have to be concerned about, as I found in Leon County, just negligence, just missed programming, just not doing it right can have a catastrophic effect in an election. Needless to say, I won my case against the state because, unbeknownst to me, the state of California had a technical advisory board of scientists. They saw my research on the internet and they validated it. And I got a call from David Wagner, who is a computer scientist at Livermore Labs, who essentially invited me to come to a conference in San Francisco. He said, we have some data that we wanted to show you. And it was, in fact, a report from the state of California, which verified the vulnerability, which identified the same problem that I identified, that you can steal elections on these debold voting machines, and no one would know, because the debold voting machines had on the memory card, that device that stored all the votes, it had a mathematical language called active-basic script, that you could add positive and negative integers, so that when you ran the morning tape, it would look like it had 0 votes on the machine, but there could be thousands of votes stored on the machine already. And we, as an election official, never could see that until Hari Hursty, a computer specialist from Europe, took an agricultural device called a crop scanner, took the memory cards and looked at them, and he saw that it was loaded with this mathematical language preloaded in the card. And then the state of Florida was forced to pass a rule saying that one person could never program that voting machine anymore. It had to have multiple people, witnesses to watch the programmers, to ensure that the programmers were in fact not misprogramming the device. And in fact, in Leon County, we instituted a program where that programming had to be done on video, where everyone in the entire staff could watch what was being done when the voting machines were programmed. But again, the state of Florida, instead of attempting to say, great job, they wanted to kill the messenger. This was a bad thing. And I've got a great little cartoon from Milt Moran, the Miami Herald cartoonist, who shows me standing against Glenda Hood and the voting machine vendors. And I got this puzzled look in my face while they're trying to take me out of office. And Milt gave me his original cell for the cartoon that he did, because the newspapers did pick it up. And in one weekend in March, I was in over 200, my story was picked up by the Washington Post, and it ran across the country. And over 200 newspapers picked up the story about me fighting against the vendors and the political figures who were entrenched in trying to keep these machines in service. Well, I'll tell you the best thing about this whole story is eventually we put the Depot Corporation out of business. They're no longer in the voting machine business today at all. They are beginning. In this past year in the state of Florida, this spring, the state of Florida passed a bill, the election train, we call them up in Tallahassee, because everything's in the same bill, on the last day of the session. And they allowed ballot marking devices to be utilized for the first time in the state of Florida. Up until this year, every vote cast in this state by 99.9% of the citizens are on hand-marked paper ballots, which you can audit. Now, the ballot marking device is a computer screen that you touch. It will now mark a paper ballot, which is not really a paper ballot, that it generates with a QR code or a barcode and the name of your candidates. You can only verify the name, but the machine is not counting the name, it's counting what's in that barcode. And I cannot read barcode or QR code particularly as proprietary. This is now the biggest threat to the state of Florida, the use of these ballot marking devices, because one company, ES&S, Election Systems and Software, is the vendor for 2/3 of the counties in the state of Florida. The only device they are providing for their customers is a ballot marking device for the disability community. That's the only one they're providing. So it turns out that these supervisors then went to the legislature and said, you got to change the law so we can use the equipment because we don't want to change the vendor. Well, excuse me, you should have changed your vendor, because this vendor is selling this country down the river with ballot marking devices. And they cost twice as much per election than the system that is hand marked, twice as much. There's studies right now in Pennsylvania. This battle is going on nationwide. They're putting in these ballot marking devices in Georgia. I observed an election there this past Tuesday. And North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Tennessee. The companies, dirty secret is they don't make money on just selling voting equipment. They make their money with the service agreements for these devices. And if you have a hand-marked paper ballot voting system, you don't need many devices. You don't need but 2 scanners in every precinct. The rest of the technology is relatively not sophisticated. But the system that I saw in Georgia is being implemented there with ballot marking devices. That voting precinct had a printer for every marking station. There were 13 printers in this one precinct. That's more than all the printers that I need to run all the early voting sites in Leon County. You basically do 2 high-speed printers. In our system there, when an individual goes to an early voting site, we have high-speed printers that print out their paper ballot for them when they come. You come in, sign in, we hit a button, get your ballot printed for you right there. You hand mark it, you put it in the scanner, you're gone. That system is about $12 per voter in a general election versus $23 for a general election by instituting another device in between the citizen and the marking of that ballot. And they charge somewhere between $1,000 to $1,200 per device per year. So in fact, where voting machine vendors make their money is on the warranties and the service contracts for all this massive amount of equipment. And they get it every year, whether there's an election or not. That's how private voting machine vendors stay in business in the United States. Raising the question to me about why do we have private vendors controlling the most public of all of our political endeavors, which is election. Which is controlled by private entities that won't take a look at what's going on in the software. It seems to me that's a huge error. And the state of Florida, in this Senate bill that I described, 7066, the ability to audit every ballot was in that bill, and it was stripped out. It was stripped out of that bill because it didn't have a Republican sponsor. Well, I'm sorry. Elections are not partisan. They're not Democrat. They're not Republican. I've had no party affiliation for 20 years. I can't vote in any primary because of that. But election officials should not belong to any party at all. We should be completely nonpartisan, which was the recommendation made by the committee that looked at the 2000 election in Florida. One of their recommendations is all election officials in this state should be nonpartisan. The Florida legislature has not acted on that in 19 years, and I don't think they will, because they do like partisan elections. They do like them. They're wedded to their partisan nature of what they're doing. But that's really raising credibility issues with this entire process. So what I would tell you right now is audits are the key. If you're worried, as I am, about cyber warfare on our systems, and it's here, as a Homeland Security expert at a conference in New Mexico told me, there are only kind of 2 computers in the world today, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The system was not designed to be open. I mean, secure. It was designed to be open. Putting security on it is putting security on a system that was not designed for security. So that's why you cannot use any electronic device to cast a vote, whether it's phone, computer, any fax. All of these things, in fact, are not only hackable, but they're open avenues for individuals. And now that state actors, like the Russian GRU, is involved in the process, you have to worry. I'm sorry, Washington County, Glades County, you're not going to stop Russian penetration into the system. But what can determine and what can find out if it has occurred is auditing those paper ballots after the election to confirm that the electronic totals and the real totals are the same. We don't do that in this country. We got used to thinking elections were over on Tuesday, and election officials particularly don't want to do any extra work after election day. If you're not doing an audit, in my opinion, you are a national security threat. So audits are what I'm basically advocating. The Supervisor of Elections Association, after dragging their heels for many years, has agreed, okay, we have to do some audits. Right, you do have to do some audits, because just as you do not let the bank tell you how much money you have in your bank without ever balancing your checkbook, you've got to balance those ballots to make sure they're accurate. If I can leave you with any message, it is that we must add robust, scientifically accurate audits to our elections. We have one legislative session between now and the November 2020 election to do that. It is possible to pass legislation. Let's do it. Thank you.
You have mentioned that Evolt went out of business. Actually, its machines and customer contracts were sold to election systems and software, ES&S. Now, this is a $300 million a year business, voting machine business. And ES&S, I went online to see what is ES&S. Is this a publicly held corporation that must disclose a lot of information? Well, it's owned by the McCarthy Group, LLC, in Omaha, Nebraska. And I can find nothing about this privately owned limited liability company. We were hoping to have Dr. Virginia Martin here, and she had to cancel, unfortunately. I mention her right now because it fits in very well with Brian Sancho's plea for post-election audits. Dr. Virginia Martin is the Democratic Election Commissioner in Columbia County, New York, who, along with her Republican counterpart, the Republican Election Commissioner there in Columbia County, they've implemented a comprehensive post-election audit by the hand counting, public hand counting, of all hand-marked paper ballots that were cast. That's the kind of audit that we need. If you're going to have these electronic voting machines, if you have that kind of a public hand counting of ballots after the election, it is going to deter any kind of manipulation of the software, most likely. Now, I am very happy to introduce our next speaker. Lulu Freistad is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a two-time recipient of the Edward R. Merrill Award. She's led numerous research teams analyzing election results in Florida and right here in our congressional district, our last two races for Congress. And she has analyzed, and her research teams analyzed races throughout the country, uncovering significant statistical anomalies in the results of key races. Thank you so much, Lulu, for being here.
Is this mic on? Can you hear me? Okay, I know it's getting a little late, so I think we should all just like stand up, like stretch a little bit. So we just like get some energy and get some blood flowing to our brains. It's just like a lot of information. Just shake yourself out a little bit. Shake your head up a little bit. Smile a little bit, you know, like, okay, we're still alive. Okay, good. We want jumping jacks? If you want to do some jumping jacks, that's good. I'm just gonna I think it was Ron who was saying how technical this stuff is and how it gets in the weeds, and I get to be like the weeds person sometimes. So that's why I'm just really trying to wake your brains up and try to make sure that you stay with me. I try to make this interesting. There's a really interesting story underneath all of this data, and the story is that this matters. If you go and vote, and your vote is not counted as you intended, it is not counted, period, or if worse, it's actually counted for the person that you oppose. If you vote for a referendum, yes, and the vote is actually counted no, that affects every single thing in our communities. All of the issues that you care so passionately about, that you research as a voter and talk to your neighbors about, are potentially being misrepresented when it actually comes to the place where we make our decisions. And then those people who go on to make very important decisions for us, whether we go to war, what kind of air and water we have, what kind of education our children have, those people making the decisions are potentially not the people that we chose. So I know that this is complicated. I'm going to get into some kind of complicated information, and you don't have to necessarily understand all of the statistics or the models or things like that. But what you do have to understand is that this matters. It matters that you care about it and that you talk to your communities and your organizations and the groups that you're involved in, your neighbors, your children, your parents, and you say, I care about this issue. This issue underlies everything else. I might care about this issue more than anything else right now, because if we don't solve this problem, we can't solve these other problems that we're all trying to solve. So this is really important. And I am incredibly happy to be here. I really congratulate Tim. He's been an incredibly courageous person to lead on this issue, and he has been through hell. And I'm just not going to pretend he hasn't. He really has had two very tough races, and as I'm going to show you, the results from those races are very problematic for a number of reasons. And I applaud him for having the courage to stand up and say something about it. There are many, many people who run for office who have doubts about their elections, and they never say anything about it because they don't want their careers to be, to get a bad name. They don't want you to be seen as a sore loser. They don't want perhaps to be tainted as a conspiracy theorist. It takes a lot of courage for somebody like Kathy, an attorney in her community, to get up and say, I don't believe the results of these elections. So he's been very courageous, and all of the people here at this panel tonight are courageous, and you are courageous for coming here and paying attention to this. So I salute you and thank you so much. So I do want to add a little bit to what Ian said. I completely agree with him, especially on 2 points. The partisan administration of elections is probably the #1 problem that we have with our elections here today, like in the United States, and we never talk about that. Nobody ever talks about that. We're talking about a lot of things that are very important, but many other countries, Western democracies, Australia, for example, has a very strict nonpartisan administration of their elections. And if you think about it, if someone is a member of their political party, how are they going to, and especially sometimes these people are very involved in their political parties, leaders of the Democratic or Republican Party, how are they going to objectively count the votes? And isn't that what we all want? We want the votes to be counted impartially and fairly. So really, the discussion about a nonpartisan administration of elections is one of the most important discussions we can have. Thank you for bringing that up. And iron. And in regard to audits, I couldn't agree with him more that they're very important. But again, this is something that we don't talk about. Audits need to be conducted by a neutral administration. Right now, the way that we are mostly talking about audits in this country are audits that election officials themselves will conduct after the fact on elections. Well, when the IRS comes and audits you, and believe me, I know because I've been audited by the IRS, they do not send you a letter and say, Lulu, would you like to recount your taxes for us? We're a little concerned. We don't think it came out exactly right. No. they send an independent auditor, and that person sits next to you at the table and goes through all of your receipts themselves, an independent auditor. So when we talk about auditing elections, we need to be talking about independent auditing boards that are auditing elections, not election commissioners recounting the results, not votes, as Iron said, being run back through the same machines. As far as I understand it, here in Florida, it is actually illegal to count your ballots by hand, 100%. They passed, after the 2000 debacle, they passed legislation. You actually cannot legally count all the ballots by hand. When they say, like they did in 2018, that they're going to have a hand recount, what they mean is that they run all the ballots back through the machine, and if there are any undervotes or overvotes, those are votes where the machine didn't record a vote or recorded 2 votes, they will take those ballots and look at those ballots by hand. Now that is a problem if you literally are not legally allowed to have a full hand count. I don't know how you're ever going to actually determine the results of the election. So that is a bill that I would suggest Florida needs to work on immediately. So I'm going to get going with my presentation here, and I'm going to try to move through this stuff rapidly. This is some of my background. I have worked in network news for over 10 years, and I did contribute to Emmy Award-winning programming at ABC. I've done security investigations that have received more than 4 million views at Now This. And last year, I co-founded with some colleagues of mine an organization called Smart Elections. And I see that my slides are up. Do I need a screen? Are they over there? You guys can see my slides? Yeah, I'm so excited. Okay. Do they look okay? Are they centered? Okay, great. Here we go. So I was the journalist who started the public records request that eventually did lead to Brenda Snipes being suspended from her job. And here's the first, or one of, I think this was one of 3 public records requests that I put in. And Tim joined me on these requests, and eventually he got an attorney, filed a lawsuit because they would not comply with our public records requests. But here we requested to look at the ballots and the ballot images in Broward County from his election. And eventually, as I said, that did lead to Brenda Snipes' suspension, which we talked about. It was one of the things that Rick Scott cited when he did suspend her, that she had a history of violating the election laws of the state, which came about because after Tim filed the lawsuit and we were trying to get access to the ballots and the ballot images in his race, rather than actually show us those paper ballots, Dr. Snipes' office destroyed the ballots. They destroyed them while the lawsuit was pending and while a public records request was pending, both of which are illegal. So she was violating the election laws of the state, and it did eventually lead to her suspension. So you might ask, why did I want to see the ballots and know this race? I live in New York, in Brooklyn. Why do I care about a race down here in Florida? Well, in 2016, I had been doing statistical analysis on election results all over the country. I've been involved in the issue of election security since the first documentary that I made in 2008, where I started to become aware of this issue. I filmed a hacker, a graduate student, Alex Halderman. I believe it was the first film that was put out of someone actually hacking a U.S. voting machine, and it just rocked my world. It totally changed my perspective of what could happen. And since that time, I had been actively pursuing this issue and trying to present this to the public in different ways. And in 2016, I said, well, let me do this. Because at that time, it was kind of before the Russians and before everybody was so worried about election security. I said, let me just think about what would be persuasive. And what would be persuasive is if we knew that election results were actually incorrect. That might help persuade people that this is a problem. So I started looking at election results all over the country. And I looked at the impressive team of statisticians and data scientists, and in particular, I was collaborating with Dr. Chris Shuren, who was a former head of the American Statistical Association, and he was at Georgetown University, and he would vet our results and look at them. And when we were looking at these results in 2016, we looked at the primaries in state after state in 2016, and we were seeing statistical red flags, things that just didn't look correct. Patterns that were following normal statistical results that weren't following normal statistical patterns. And so then Tim ran his race in 2016, and people said to me, Lulu, would you have your team look at his results? And so we did, and we looked at them pretty thoroughly for about 4 weeks before we said anything. I looked at them, I had the team look at them, we did a lot of different analysis on them, and I also made calls down here and called different communities to try to figure out their demographic explanations for what we were seeing in the results. And I'm just going to show you these 2 slides. This is one thing that was troubling to us. In Broward County, luckily, or I don't know luckily, but one thing that's good is that your supervisor of elections releases a lot of demographic information. And that means that we know who votes in a very specific way. We know that an African American is voting in this precinct. We know that a female is voting in this precinct. We know how many Latinos came out to vote in this precinct, how many didn't vote in this precinct. We have very, very specific data about the demographics. So we know who voted and we know where they voted. The only thing we really don't know is how they voted, right? Because that's secret. So what we did was we did this interactive, and when I say we, the data scientist I was working with, in particular Bill Evans, did this. He did a mock-up, and it was interactive. And you could put into it each demographic category how much you thought they voted. So I don't know, can you see on the chart up there, I have like white, black, Hispanic, other, up, down, and slow. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would just plug in formulas. You know, if Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Tim's opponent, got 43% of the vote, white vote, and Tim Canova got 57% of the white vote, and she got 70% of the black vote, got 30% of the black vote, could we get the results to look like the results that actually were certified? And the answer was no. No matter what figures we plugged in, we could not get the results to make sense with the people that had supposedly voted. So you can see there's 4 lines in this graph. There's a red line and a kind of aqua blue line up and below. Those are the actual lines of the certified vote. And then you can see there's kind of a pink and a gray line in the middle, and those are the projected votes. Like when we're plugging in the numbers, if so many people vote this way, if so many people vote this way. So this particular formula that we put in, you can see it doesn't match that at all, right? It doesn't match. So what we did was we put a slope in. We took some percentages and we added 3.5% to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's vote, and we took away 3.5% from Canova's vote, and we were able to predict the results exactly as they were reported, the certified results. And that was very concerning to us. That really, really seemed odd. And so that is why I did a public records request of the ballot images in 2016, because I wanted to see the ballots. I was like, maybe there's something that we're missing here. Let's look at the ballots and let's see what the ballots say. And you know, they did not want us to see those ballots. And I will tell you, up one side and down the other, we tried and tried and tried to look at those ballots. And the Broward County Supervisor of Elections Office did not want us to see them. And they would let us go in there and look at them if we told them in advance what precincts we wanted to look at. Well, let me tell you, I didn't want to tell them what precincts we wanted to look at. I wanted it to be a surprise. And they would not let us videotape or take photographs, even though the Florida public records laws allow for videotape and photographs of a public records request. And I know because I spoke to other people who had done public records requests and had been able to photograph and videotape. And so because they would not allow us to do this or make a documentation of it, we sued. Tim sued, he got an attorney and he sued. And as you know, they destroyed the ballots rather than actually showing them to us. But we did get some data from those public records requests. Now, during this time, Edward Snowden did tweet,
And he seemed to be supporting our work. We had put in the public records request, I think, in October of 2016. And in November of 2016, Edward Snowden tweeted, "Hacking voting machines not that difficult. Hiding a secret deviation in votes from after the fact statistical analysis, nearly impossible." So I was encouraged by that. He's somebody who has a lot of experience with this type of thing, and it was encouraging that we seemed to think we were on the right track. And I will say that once we did actually get some of the data, we did find some very significant discrepancies in it. What I was able to get from the Broward County Supervisor of Elections office was the number of voters who voted, and I was able to compare that to the number of cast ballots. And in almost every precinct, the number of voters who voted did not match the number of cast ballots. In fact, out of 211 precincts, there were only 19 precincts that had the same number of voters and cast ballots. Now that's not right, right? We all know that if there's a voter who votes, one voter who votes is supposed to match one ballot. And there were over 1,000, it was over 1,000 vote discrepancy when we went down through all of the precincts. It was remarkable. And I interviewed various experts about this discrepancy, this type of discrepancy. Was that normal? Was that something that just happened? And the experts that I spoke with said absolutely not. And here is one quote from Dr. Buell, who is a professor of computer science at the University of South Carolina. And he said, "I see what I would call a high likelihood of massive incompetence, either that or there is fraud." So that was in 2016. Now, what kind of thing is in the machines, the voting machines in Broward County? We know for a fact that there are wireless modems in the voting machines because an activist named John Brakey in 2018 went and photographed them. So here is a photograph of a wireless modem in the voting machines in Broward County. What that means is that the voting machines are directly connected to the internet. And I don't care what anybody tells you over and over again, people will tell you that voting machines are connected to the internet, but a modem is a piece of equipment that connects to the internet. That is what it does. So when you have modems in your voting machines, they are connected to the internet. And when equipment is connected to the internet, it can receive information and signals and malware, and it can be controlled from someone on the internet. So that is one thing that we know about the voting machines in Broward County. 2 minutes, okay. So this is what I'm gonna do. I just want to play you one more thing. In 2018, we found a lot of other problems in Tim's second race. So I worked with a gentleman named Dr. David Bader. Let's go through that. And he's an extremely experienced data science expert. He's running the New Jersey Institute of Technology right now. And I showed him the results in Tim's 2018 race. In Tim's 2018 race, there were multiple issues, but one of the issues was that when we did what's called a cumulative study, where we add each precinct in each precinct, the average that Tim received was 5% of the votes, no matter which demographic you looked at. No matter if you looked at Hispanic votes or Black votes or white votes or not party affiliated votes, Tim always received 5% of the vote. It just didn't make any sense. So I asked Dr. Bader if that was a problem, and Dr. Bader did his own analysis on it, and he definitely thought it was a problem. And this is what he said about it.
So for Canova to get exactly 5% across every precinct is unbelievable. It's absolutely unlikely. It'd be like winning the lottery every day for a year. There's something fully unnatural about this CD23 result this is going across about 200 precincts. It is absolutely shocking. These are like ranges of votes, and I see from tens to hundreds within these precincts, and in every single case, it's like within a very small delta of 5%.
So that was Dr. Daniel Bader on the results of Tim's race. And I just want to say one thing about what we do need, because what we do need is totally doable. Like, this isn't like climate change where we need to totally like change, you know, the planet and get billions of people to change their behavior. This is so solvable, what we need here. And it's really basically 3 things, and maybe 4. We need hand-marked paper ballots, non-tabulating ballot marking devices, and Ian mentioned this, although I know this seems like a complicated phrase, non-tabulating ballot marking devices. It basically just means you just want a ballot marking device to just mark your ballot. You don't just mark and count your ballot. By the time a ballot marking device marks and counts your ballot, it doesn't need you anymore. It's like a driverless car, right? So you want a non-tabulating ballot marking device for voters with disabilities who do need a ballot marking device. We need robust manual independent audits. I did stress previously how they need to be independent. And we need cooperation between the security community and the disability community. And one of the main things that is just cracking this entire elections process is that the disability community is working separately from the security community and often at war. And so progress that one community makes then holds back the other community. And we need to work with the disability community. The rights of voters with disabilities are very important. They have gone through a lot to get to the ballot box, and they deserve to vote privately, independently, and to have their votes counted securely. And we absolutely need to be working cooperatively with them. So thank you so much for your time and for being here.
So my 2016 race results were statistically implausible, and by 2018 they were statistically impossible. And actually, right here, this Culture and Community Center is where I voted in 2018. So the moment you take your paper ballot and it's scanned is the moment you should be on your knees praying to the God of algorithms that it's actually being counted properly. It also means we're at a crime scene. Perhaps every precinct where ballots are scanned is a crime scene. Now, our last speaker, but not least, I think he's going to shed a lot of light on how this kind of manipulation is actually occurring. It's Betty Smith. Now, Betty Smith was a computer programmer who worked with Bev Harris on Fraction Magic, showing how elections are. He discovered flaws in the electronic vote tabulation systems and showed how election results are easily manipulated and altered just by a few keystrokes. And he is now an election official. He's a Shelby County election commissioner in Memphis, Tennessee.
All right, so I'm gonna be a very dirty guy. Listening to all of these descriptions that you've heard from all of the speakers, I'm actually going to try to represent a large portion of everything that they've said. But this is going to be a demonstration where you can see what it actually is. There is the potential for computers not to count correctly. If you look at the current slide, this is an instance where in 2015, is it up? In 2015, shout out to BlackBerry, I took a picture of a precinct location with my BlackBerry phone of a total from a direct recording electronic machine. It's a DRE, doesn't produce a paper trail. However, it does produce a receipt where you can see what happened at the end of the night. So I took a picture of this. It's literally the receipt. It's the closest thing to what was counted. I took the picture of this poll tape. And about 3 or 4 days later, what you see in this arrow is what happened after it was tabulated. So what you see is 548 votes on election night is now represented as 330 votes 2 or 3 days later after it's tabulated. We all got calculators. We know that's not proper addition. Nonetheless, this is a time where software did not perform correctly. However, when that was happening, I was conducting a separate study. And that study is what I want to show you guys tonight. So this region, the Diebold software, when I was examining the Diebold software, I got the information as a result of some court cases. Tennessee, and countless lawsuits in Memphis, Tennessee with our elections. But there was a discovery hearing that granted summary judgment where we were allowed to get some of the proprietary software. And in 2014, pre-Russia, I was getting contacted by a number of candidates who insisted that their elections had been stolen. I really didn't believe it. I just thought they lost. And as a consolation prize, I told them I would look at the software. So I'm going to go into a video that when I was inside of this software program, I found out that the software counted us like money. And there was a feature inside of it that allowed us to be removed from 1%. So you can be 1.2. If you're a black guy like me, be 0.6. Hey, my man, he sees it. 3/5, so you can be 0.6. That's literally 2/5. 2/5. Y'all are brutal. I'm So this guy is a reporter. The 2015 example of the poll tape, Bloomberg Business Week, they came down, they did an investigation, and they wrote about it. It was a cover story in Bloomberg Business Week in 2016. However, they did a cybersecurity segment in 2016 that was right before the presidential election. And this reporter, it's about 2 minutes, and he really talks about this feature. And I just want you guys to hear it because I think he explains it very well. So take a listen to what he said.
Interesting thing about the GEMS tabulator is not just that it's used in many of the elections that many of you watching may participate in, but it has a bug or a feature, as its creators would call it. And this bug was discovered by a computer programmer in Memphis named Benny Smith, who we profiled as part of our business week. Now, Benny has found some really interesting.
Okay, you guys can see it now, right? Can we see?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'll play it again. So,
interesting thing about the GEMS tabulator is not just that it's used in many of the elections that many of you watching may participate in, but it has a bug or a feature, as its creators would call it. And now this bug was discovered by a computer programmer in Memphis named Benny Smith, who we profiled as part of our Business Week piece. Now, Benny has found some really interesting oddities about Memphis's vote counting and vote tabulation, some very serious problems that were undiscovered until we looked into them. One of the things that he found, which we didn't write about, but which we think is really relevant here, is that GEMS has this feature where in very rare cases, in very rare instances where counties or municipalities are voting on land use taxes, certain votes can be weighted differently. So if I own 1 acre and you own 2 acres, in these very specific cases, your vote will count for twice as much as mine when we're voting on things like property taxes. Again, very rare niche cases. However, the system allows election administrators to adjust and basically weight races according to those guidelines. It makes a lot of sense in those limited uses. However, what Benny discovered was that this feature appears to be turned on by default across this universe of GEMS databases. So what does that mean? Well, that means you can literally weight races based on who you want to win. You can plug in a percentage into these computers before the race and say, I want Jordan Robinson to get 75% of the vote. And yet the trick is going into these races, you don't know if you're going to hack an election, how many total voters will come out. It's very hard to rig the race if you don't know how many voters will come out. But if you can assign percentages to a given candidate, it doesn't matter how many voters come out. You can say Jordan Robinson gets 75% of the vote. Whatever the total number that comes in is tabulated at, the numbers can be adjusted accordingly. I mean, it's impossible to overstate how significant this is. This is, again, a feature, but winds up being a security vulnerability. And I want to give you an example of what that looks like. I should preface this all by saying this is a proof of concept that this computer programmer has come up with. This is just demonstrating that computers can't always be trusted. They can be tampered with easily. And in this case, this isn't even a hack. This is a modification of the creators of the GEM system have enabled on purpose.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys gather yourselves because you guys are not about to see a hack. You're going to see a properly conducted maiden election where I'm not a bad guy. I'm actually doing what the software is allowing. And Mr. Sancho said it perfectly. It's the front door. I'm coming through the front door to do this. So this software that I'm about to open is election software that we in Shelby County still use to this day. Georgia still uses it. A number of places still use this software. We had an election a few days ago, and this is the software that we conducted in. So I'm gonna bring up some totals. I would just note that this is a concluded election. Therefore, you won't see any numbers changing back and forth, but we're gonna have a fun. I'm gonna show you some winners, and I think we're gonna take a random person from the audience to be the bad guy. I don't want no dirt on me from this one, so I'm gonna let somebody else do it. I'm gonna open this up so that.
So you're gonna let them pick percentages this time.
Did I say okay?
Are they?
All right. Yeah, we can let them pick. Are we dirty? Did we? We're some dirty people. Okay.
Maybe to use a program like that.
Well, let's see. Let's just run it all. Let's run it all through a test. I'm gonna bring it all up. And if I could get somebody to raise their hand, we didn't pick it. We got it. Absolutely. All right. So we're gonna bring up some totals, and I'm gonna.
Is he screen recording?
Yeah, you guys should be able to see it. So you can go to the television, and you can just. I'm gonna be your fixer, and you're the dirty election administrator, and you're gonna tell me. You can pick any race on this first page because I'm gonna steal them all. I'm just gonna do it the way that you tell me. I would go for the first one because it's got the most number of votes in it. So leave them if I can burn through. And it's like 77,000 votes. So right now, this is election night, and if you guys look at these screens, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. There's some people on the other side. I'm just gonna zoom in as well. So Bill Haslam has 38,212. He's obviously Zach Womp is the second place runner. Ron Ramsey, Joe Kirkpatrick is like his career is over, and Baszler, Marsix is a sore loser also. And this is the representation of what it looks like in a different way. So for the audience, what's your name?
Ravi.
Ravi, you are streaming live.
All right.
Who would you like to win?
Zach Womp.
He already got votes. You don't want somebody just. Why is Zach Womp? Zach Womp is gonna be the winner. Zach Womp is gonna be the winner.
It's Womp.
All right. So we got two bidders. Zach Womp is gonna be the winner, and Bill Haslam is going to be capped at 5%. Do you want him to get only 5%? It's not that. All right. So the presence of an algorithm has the ability to do something like this. We're gonna do that. Don't make me look bad, but we're going to cap Bill Haslam at 5%. No matter what, he's going to get exactly 5%, whatever it is. This totally is. All right, so I'm going to bring up the proof of concept that I did that's going to enable all of this very nasty devastation to happen. So I just opened it, and it's running, and you guys can't see it because it's a silent, deadly benefactor. So if you follow my mouse, can you see, what's your name again? Ravi. Can you look at the top of the screen and tell me if you see something up here where my mouse is? Can you read what this is?
On the move it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, the top state and federal primary.
No.
Okay.
Here, where my mouse is moving.
Your mouse is moving on the top.
So you can't see it. Yeah. So you can't see it, but it's there. Everybody up here is looking. You can see it. So I'm gonna zoom in. Let's get there right there. All right. So you tell me what this is. Yeah, come on. It's an interactive. Come on, let's see it. He's really struggling. So just imagine if this is election night and somebody's trying to figure it out that this program is actually running. Are you serious? You don't hurt my feelings. Oh, there you go. No, you guys can't see it. Read it out. He's gonna take it.
Magic code.
Okay. So there is something up there that is asking me for a magic code. And I'm going to type in that magic code. And we're going to bring up some options for my man to alter this election. Right? So type in a secret code and this magic window appears. We're going to go into the governor's race where I have some options set. Bill Haslam is going to be, let me go to this option. Who did you say would win?
Zach Wong.
Zach Wong. All right, so I'm going to go and I'm going to open up some options for this. And Bill Haslam is already set at 5%. It doesn't have it yet, but I preloaded some of this stuff in. But Zach Wong is going to be the winner. And if you could pick a range from, well, you got to pick the range. I can't tell you the range. How much do you want him to win by? You got to give me a range. So I'm going to show you what it looks like because this is the planning phase. I just got a formula here that says I want a random number between 40 and 47. So he'll get 40 and 47%. But that's my percent. Be greedy. I mean, whatever.
42.
42? 42 exactly, or
It
between?
has to be 42.
All right, 40. You want to get exactly 42%,
Exactly. 42.
no matter where it is.
No
Now
matter
you're
what.
gonna get caught if you do that. I'm trying to be your advisor for it. If he
Well,
only
here's-
does 42 across the board,
It's the answer. The treasurer's.
he wants
There you
42.
go.
42 even, or 42 and some digits?
Nah, 42.
42. 42. All right, so we'll give him exactly 42% for early absentee ballot and at the polls. So the person that you said was going to win was Zach Wong, right? All right, so I'm going to go register 42%. I've never done this. So I'm going to give him exactly 42%. There are 236 precincts, so I think it was like 211 in Florida. And the person that you want to win is, but Zach Wong. So Zach Wong is now going to be this winner, and he's going to get 42%, and Bill Haslam is going to get capped at 5%, and everything else is going to fall out where it falls out. Nonetheless, Zach Wong should be the winner. 42% of about 20 candidates should be the winner. All right, so I'll exit it. My scratch work is done. This is my planning phase to make sure I can still erase the right way. I'll open it again, and I will set the instructions for this to happen. So, everybody ready?
Yeah.
All right. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8 1,000, 9 1,000. So 9 seconds, we're done. And I'm going to close this report. Progress has left the building. There's no more progress on this. Oh, no. So we'll re-preview these results. And the results will come up. And we now have a new winner. All right. So because I gave, okay. Can you guys see the totals now?
Yeah, there's a window over the total you're trying to show.
You guys can see this right here?
Now.
Okay. No, I want you to see this guy right here.
Oh.
Can you see where my mouse is?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I was not allowed to give you 42% because Tim's rule fired first, and it gave exactly 5% to Bill Haslam. And I'm going to zoom in on it so you guys can see it. You see the 5%? Yeah. But notice Bill Haslam has $3,871.65. I'm gonna let that land. It's not votes anymore. Right. He has $3,871.65. That's what the fractions are. That's what the decimals are. That's what the weights are. These are weights applied. And this application knows what I told it because I turned it on to show you that it was doing it. So the person who won was Ron Ramsey. He ended at 52% because I extracted 5% out, which made his total vote more. And you can't touch the write-in votes because it's not the proper way to steal. However, did I pick Ron Ramsey? Yeah. Let's do it again. All right, let's pick Ron Ramsey. Let's do it again. Hey, man, I ain't got to look bad. All right, so I may have to give him a slightly higher total. Sure. Because of his variation. Because Tim's rule is firing first. There are some rules to it. which means that you have to be sophisticated to steal an electronic. This was nonetheless, let's see if we can give a little bit more of a boost to him. He will definitely be the winner. Let me set those again.
That's why you need to rank.
Quick question. You would normally do this using the demographics, right?
Yeah, you would do it. I would not do it this blunt. This is a very blunt. This is a very blunt. You would get caught accused. That's a very blunt. Yeah, it's a very blunt instrument when you look this way. And also because I'm designating that Bill Haslam as the person that has the first priority, I did it because Tim wants to show that it is statistically impossible unless you're an algorithm to do something like that. So let's bump this guy up to 52%. Just bump him up to 52%. You mind if I alter your a little bit? Can I get some decimal places? Decimal places are really the fun. No, I'll do 50.
567.
52.567? I like that one better. 52.567. All right. And because he's second in the list, you have to do it this way or it should be he's going to get 52% of whatever is left. So after you remove what Bill Haslam got, the 5% rule is running first. So let's see if I go here and I give him 52%. And you guys will know it's definitely doing it. As we said, it's going to run it again now. So let's run it again. It's the same 10 seconds. Can you imagine on election night when we be waiting like an hour for totals to come in and we sit up here fighting over how much we would give somebody for 30 seconds? All right, so that's one. Yeah, kind of. I did it. Oh no, it's a lot of sophistication. All right, so let's run again. Now let's see what we got. Can you win, please? All right. So Zach Lump is a narrow winner at this point. Can you guys see it? So I had to bump him up a little bit to get him because Tim is taken away. So he's ended up with 49% of the total. Can you guys see it? All right. That's a really simple.
To me, when you say it's $1.06, you still need its votes, but you need votes to be counted.
All right, can you see it now?
Right, yeah.
So Zach Lump is the winner. I have redeemed my salvation. He has 38,600. the method is called an allocation, where I basically say this guy is going to get 52.56, whatever he told me, % of whatever is remaining.